Hi, welcome back to the Out of the Abyss notes, Shane Plays series on the game I'm running, the campaign I'm running for Out of the Abyss. This is session 6, and we have, by the end of these notes, we'll have finished up with our first foray into chapter 2, which is Into the Darkness, which covers like traveling through the Underdark between locations and the ecology and random encounters, both terrain and um, creatures and all that stuff. So this week's session went very much as planned, almost perfect. That doesn't always happen, but in fact, we finished a few minutes early, and everybody I could tell felt that we had done quite a bit, and I was happy where we were at. So it's always good when you know the notes you want to hit, and those are the notes that you do hit. So glad about that. At the end of last session, um, they were still several days out from Gracklstugh. They're traveling from Velkenvelve to Gracklstugh. That's the location they chose based on, like, hey, we can get equipment and stuff there. And then I kind of talked a little bit last night too. It's not just equipment, but the NPCs that they're with, feel that it'd also be a good city to go to because it's the Grey Dwarves who have no love of the Drow, and the Drow are chasing the players. They're certain of that. They're going to want to recapture them. So, and the Drow that's with them, the Drow NPC is a little like, I don't know what I'm going to do when I get there, but he doesn't have anywhere else to go. Definitely safety in numbers. So, and uh, the fungus. So the Drow is infected with spores, and because of that, he wants to go there so he can spread his infection. He doesn't realize that. I don't think it's more of kind of a subconscious kind of thing. So what I wanted to hit, as I mentioned at the end of last video, was that they would finish their journey to Gracklstugh, and I was going to summarize as much of that as I could because they'd already have 2 sessions of travel. And there's going to be a lot of that in this campaign, so I didn't want to spend, session after session after session just doing the daily travel. Um, so, and by the dice rolls, which are, you can summarize. So I just rolled a couple of times to summarize their travel, and I rolled 6s twice. And when you summarize travel and Out of the Abyss, you roll a d6 and you add 1. So that was two. I rolled 6 twice, so that's 7 twice after you add the 1. So that was 14 days of travel right there. And they were already 8 days towards Gracklstugh, and I think it's a 28-day journey. And then I think I rolled another like 4 or something like that. So just by the rules. I mean, I was going to get them there anyway if I had to, using DM prerogative. But just by the rules, it worked out so that they were they made it there anyway by the summarized um, rules. And they did, the nights that we did role play, the long rests and the camping and all that. Um, there was a couple times they rolled. I'm letting them forage, and if they do a DC 15 or better, then they forage enough that they can fast travel the next day. So they did that twice. So with all of that, they definitely made it to Gracklstugh by the end of the session. And the extra speed travel, they don't know this, but the faster travel is also helping reduce the chance by the mechanic, the chase mechanic that's in chapter 2 of the Drow party that's chasing them. That helped them there. So and now they did have a terrain encounter, and there were 2 things about this encounter that I liked. One was that it it was an interesting role playing experience that they enjoyed, but 2, it got to introduce the madness concept. Now, hadn't really talked about this a lot yet, but there's in Out of the Abyss, it's almost like Call of Cthulhu with a sanity check, not quite, but almost like that. Now, in the Dungeon Master's Guide, there's already rules for madness. There's like 3 levels of madness, and different things that can trigger madness and how to cure madness, and what the type. And it goes from like a very uh, limited, short-term bout of madness to, like an ongoing, like deep neurosis or something. So, and in Out of the Abyss, because madness, with the demon lords erupting into the Underdark, madness is kind of permeating the Underdark in Out of the Abyss. So not only is it already dangerous by definition or by virtue of being the Underdark, but it's even more dangerous now because there's madness that is kind of permeating the Underdark. So, and there's on page 21 in Out of the Abyss, it talks about, the madness levels. Level 1, a bout of short-term madness. Level 2 is a bout of long-term madness that lasts 1d10 by 10 hours, so it could last days or over a week. And a bout of indefinite madness that can last until cured. And then a bout of short-term madness, which is level 1, which lasts 1d10 minutes. And the way it works in Out of the Abyss is, to add to the existing madness rules in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, the characters make saving throws against madness whenever one of the following events occurs. The characters encounter or witness something particularly alien or disturbing, such as a demon lord. The characters stay in a Fair's Rest suffused area for a long time, 8 or more consecutive hours. And the Fair's Rest is the areas where there's sort of areas infused with sort of a glowing magic that has certain properties, and it's throughout the Underdark. And then a character takes psychic damage, particularly in an area suffused with Fair's Rest. So, and you start at level 0, and then if you get madness, you're at level 1, and then if you get another bout of madness, you're at level 2, and then if you get another bout of madness, you're at level 3. So even though, say you go from 0 and then you fail a saving throw and you get a bout of short-term madness, which only lasts 1d10 minutes, then that leaves you at level 1. So the next time you accumulate a madness, you'll be at level 2, which would be a bout of long-term madness, which can last 1d10 by 10 hours. And then after that, you would have indefinite madness. So, and evidently it keeps... if a creature with level 3 madness fails a madness saving throw, its madness level becomes 1. So they just keep accumulating madnesses. So it's not like if you're at level 3 and then you fail, your indefinite madness doesn't go away. You keep that, but you also get about a short-term madness. So it just keeps going and stacking up. And then the Dungeon Master's Guide has rules for what, like random tables to roll on for the effect of the madness and that sort of thing. So, what is cool about that is, well, not only is that in and of itself cool, but the terrain encounter, and in Chapter 2, there's not only creature random encounters, but there's terrain encounters, and there's also 4 set encounters that you can use just to spice things up. You don't necessarily roll, you just know that you're going to take your characters there at one point. Hold on a second. So I gave them a terrain encounter, and I think I just rolled, if I remember right. I just gave it purely up to chance, and I think I rolled a random encounter, and a terrain came up. Now I already knew in the back of my mind that I didn't want a creature encounter this time, because I already had, as I mentioned in the last video, Bupido, the Darrow, is actually crazy, and he's the one that's been leading them to Gracklstugh, but he's also convinced that he's the avatar of a Darrow deity, and he's wants to one by one bump off the characters and NPCs and do these sort of rituals, laying their organs out around them. So, and that's already happened once last session, and they didn't know who did it. And I knew I wanted to go ahead and have that occur before they got to Gracklstugh, try to resolve that. So I didn't want to have a creature encounter or combat. But I did legitimately roll terrain, so I let that happen. And I rolled randomly, and then what came up was a gas leak, which is the same thing they ran into last session. I didn't want to do that. So I rolled again, and it came up webs. And webs for the terrain encounter is you do run into webs, but I think there's also a chance of giant spiders. I didn't want to do that. So I just went ahead, did DM's prerogative, and I scanned the possibilities really quick, and I decided to go with horrid sounds. Now let me read this to you. I really liked this one, and it turned out to be a lot of fun, and it helped me introduce the madness thing to the characters and the players. And up to this point, they didn't really know about the madness thing going on in the Underdark. But here, horrid sounds. For hours, the party's travel is plagued by terrible shrieks, moans, and incoherent gibbering echoing through nearby passages, without any apparent origin. Each character must make a saving or a successful DC 11 Wisdom saving throw. On a failed save, the character's madness level increases by 1. So I had everybody roll, and 4 or 5 people failed. Now remember, we got a big group. We had a couple extra people show up last night because it was at a store. So I mean, I think we had like 11 people, maybe even 12 playing, which again is very large, but we make it work. We have fun, and you know, it just works. So it's, you know, and nobody else wants to DM. So what are you going to do? You know, we do have another side group that kind of goes sometimes, but they didn't go last night, or they weren't playing last night. And this new guy showed up, and he was like, "Whoa, y'all really play with this many people?" And what I felt like saying was, and I didn't, because it would have been a smart remark, and that's, you know, I'm not there to make anybody feel dumb for asking a question, because he's really like, "Wow." I'm like, I should have said, "Who all wants to raise your hand? Who wants to DM?" You know, how many hands would have gone up, right? So, again, since it's at a store and I'm doing it on behalf of the store to help the store, we make it work. I wouldn't try to do it at home, but we still have a lot of fun. And we've got some players who show up every week, and we've got a good group. So, but and we have some people that are about to go on vacation for like 2 months, and that's like a dad and 3 of his kids. So that's going to drop dramatically. But I would definitely like to see a second group going that we can direct new people to and say, hey, that's the group that new players need to join. So anyway, having said all that, so several people failed, and it was madnesses anywhere from, like I said, you roll in the Dungeon Master's Guide, and it was anywhere from a couple of people just started gibbering incoherently. The half-orc paladin went catatonic, went to her happy place inside, its female character. Another character had an overwhelming desire to eat dirt, so they were scrabbling around, clawing at the cavern floors, looking for anything that might be like dirt. And one character, actually Bupido, because you know, it's like, hey, you're going to roll for the NPCs, so I rolled for the NPCs, and a Jim Jar, or I can't remember if it's Jim Jar. I know for a fact that Bupido failed. And the result on his random roll was that he starts attacking the nearest character or the nearest person. And so Jim Jar happened to be standing right next to him. So he started pummeling on Jim Jar. And my rogue, I have 2 rogues. One of the rogues failed and came up with just absolutely terrified and must flee. Now, what's dangerous about that is that, you know, this is the Underdark, so if they take off, they could easily get lost and be hard to find. And anybody who chased after them, the same thing could happen. So we had people trying to tackle that character, and I was making it contested strength checks, and the fleeing character was just pushing them off, just by the rolls, just like push 2 or 3 people off. And then the bard. Now, in retrospect, one of the new players that showed up last night was a bard. And he had madness, where he was gibbering. And he's like, well, I want to throw an illusion in front of the fleeing rogue to try to stop him from fleeing. And I said, well, let's look it up. And there was no verbal component to the spell. So I went ahead and allowed it because he's gibbering. So he can't really throw this, you know, if it was a verbal component, he wouldn't have been able to do it. In retrospect, I think I should have ruled, well, you're overcome with madness, so you can't throw the spell. But at the time, we let it happen. And he was successful, and I did the whole, I let the rogue have a saving throw against his illusion, a minor illusion. The rogue failed. So what I did, I said he's still overcome with fear and fright, and he's still going to flee, but it paused him just for a second when he sees the illusion, and he's like, "Oh, what do I do?" And now his mental decision is going to land on keep fleeing, but for one brief moment, he's kind of paused, and that that allowed one more character who hadn't had enough movement to catch up with him in the first place. It was the half-orc wizard, who at first was going to magic missile him, and everyone's like, no, 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 you know. But yeah, he was like, you know, magic missiles coming online to take this guy out. And but anyway, he ended up, the half-orc wizard tackled him, and then everybody kind of pile-dived on top of him. And the characters that I allowed to try to tackle him when he was running were characters that had more base movement than him. I had a monk with a base movement of 40, and then I had like a wood elf or something with a base movement of 35. And that, I don't know, somehow it worked out that way, and they were able to, I gave them to a chance to try to tackle him. And he's the, you know, he was doing the, as somebody said, the Heisman Trophy, you know, get away from me. So, and then the Bupido, who was pummeling on the other NPC Jim Jar, the other bard happened to have sleep readied and put them to sleep. And just for the narrative and the flow of everything, I didn't go into who's standing where and get into a bunch of grid-based this and that. I just said, you know, okay, they're asleep. And, you know, one character, my character, or my player I told you about, who's like, you know, knows the rules upside, he's like, I want to know how many hit points. I said, they're asleep. You know, it's fine. I didn't make, you know, roll for how many points and then check that. I just said they're asleep. So, because I didn't want to really make this a combat encounter. This is more of a role-playing encounter. So that was the madness, and they enjoyed it. You know, we said wasn't that, you know, more fun than just another creature encounter? And they were like, yeah. So I think they really enjoyed that encounter. You know, we really played it out. There was a lot of laughing and stuff like that, and you know, they got the point that you know, this is creepy at the same time. And you know, they were, well, I want to, you know, they were doing investigation checks and where are these sounds coming from, and you know, I made it very clear, so you don't know. I mean, I was even letting them roll, but I was no matter what they rolled on their investigation, I was like, you don't know where they're coming from, because the you know, it said they don't know. It's this weird, creepy madness thing going on. So they couldn't find the source of the sounds, and they were in it for several hours. So that was how that went. Now, one thing that I did, and we did resolve the Bupido subplot, but before I get to that, at the end of last session, the half-orc paladin, played by my player, you know, who knows the rules inside and out and wants everything to be, you know, which, like I said, is usually more useful than not. But every now and then I have to say, you know, I'm the DM. This is how we're going to do it. But he, you know, at the end of last session, the were-rats, Topsy and Turvy, the Deep Gnome twins, were trying to get away so they wouldn't hurt anybody. And they were transforming. And he's like, well, my character would chase them and smite the evil. Okay, so he went down there, provoked a fight that lasted a long time, and ended up with people hurt. It took a long time to get them because they had a very, very few options to be able to actually damage a lycanthrope, and their wizard, the half-orc necromancer that was there last night, that was going to magic missile the fleeing player who had the fear madness. He wasn't there last week, so they didn't have their wizard to, you know, use spells on these were-rats. So it was a hard fight, and you know, the monk really took a licking trying to help take these guys down, because he was like grappling onto them and letting, you know, the clerics do cantrips and flame them, you know, with radiant damage and all that. Well, anyway, so I did two things role-playing wise. You know, because you have players who will be like, well, this is what my character would do, and I agree with that. I do not want to squash that, okay? But at the same time, there can also be role-playing repercussions to that. So I used Eldith, who is the NPC female dwarf from Gauntlegrim, who's in the group, and she's very self-sacrificing, you know, for the good of others and all that. And she went off after the fight. She really went off on the paladin, and the players kind of like, to the point where we're like, hey, we're role playing here, you know. And he's like, okay, yeah, I know, I got it. And but he was like, you know, kind of like deer in the headlights. And she was like, I don't care how you think things work, above world, but down here things are different. They were trying to get away. They weren't trying to hurt anybody. You put the whole party in danger. Well, I'm a paladin. I don't care what your ideals are. Down here, things are different, and this is for the sake of the group. And she was really, because dwarves have this famous temper, and I let her just come unglued. And I made it clear 2 or 3 times during this. I said, look, this is not me and you, William. This is her and your character. And he's like, yeah, I get it totally. I'm like, okay, just want to make sure. So, because I was really role playing it. I was really, in fact, there was one player had to step away to take a work call. And they shared later that they, until they realized what was going on, they thought I was really angry at him. And then they caught on that this was role playing. But she really went off on his character. About that, because he did the player chose to provoke that fight, when they had every option of not having that fight, and she's like, the Underdark's already dangerous enough. The whole point down here is to avoid the danger, not seek it out, and all that. We're trying to escape, and she really, like, there's up world, and then there's down here, and down here is different. So she really went off on him, and then she went off on the rogue. Who, if you listened to or watched last session, one of the players said, "Oh, there's enough people out there fighting already. I'm just going to stay back here in the camp and hang out in my bedroll." I mean, literally did that, and she went off on him. She was like, what were you thinking? I hope you got your beauty rest, because she's very self-sacrificing and self-serving, or not self-serving, very self-sacrifices, and serving others will, lose her life to help others. And she went off on that player's character. And he's kind of like, whoa, because he's enjoying watching her go off on the paladin. And then she turns around and goes off on him. And he's like, well, there was already enough people out there. What could I have done? And so she, like, points at all the different characters, especially the monk, who's still kind of smoldering from all the, sacred flames blasting into him while he was grappling a were-rat. And, she's like, you could have helped just like everybody else did. And, and I made it clear, I backed up and said, again, this is her character role-playing with your character. This isn't, personal between me and you. But I'm trying to get across that, hey, you can role-play guys however you want, but there's also role-playing repercussions, if that's what we're going to do, which is fine with me, and I think most of the group likes it. And I even told him, I said, look, your character doesn't have to take this. Your character can be like, hey, that's your opinion, lady, whatever. So anyway, we kind of went through all that, and I thought that was interesting. But we did that at the beginning of the session, because, we basically picked up right after the were-rats were dead, and they were beginning their long rest that had been interrupted by the were-rats transforming and trying to get away before they hurt anybody. Because they were trying to leave anyway, and they just waited one night too long because they'd already shared they were going to leave. So I thought that was interesting and fun, but I wanted to make sure, because I was really laying it on with Eldith. I did make sure to, hey guys, this is just role playing. So I think it went well. Now with Bupido, the way I wrapped up Bupido was, there's one character who's a blind rogue, and the player who plays Daggers, the blind rogue, who was raised in a circus. And it had sight when he was young, but then he lost his sight later. And the way I play the blind rogue is I give him the combat disadvantages and this and that, just like by the condition of blinded. But I give him advantage on listen checks, and I give him 1 point of inspiration per session, just for the sheer audacity of playing a blind character. And it's interesting, and he plays it pretty well. But he's got some ideas for rules he wants to use later in the campaign as his character progresses, and so he's trying to do some interesting stuff. Now, what I did, and the player himself in most combat situations or most encounters will kind of hang back, and he's been playing forever in real life, role-playing games, so he's usually got good ideas and knows what to do. But he never tries to take over the situation or the encounter. He's cool to offer advice or hang out or whatever, but he hardly ever gets the limelight. So what I did, role-playing wise, I figured that Bupido would assume that a blind character would be an easy target. And two, I wanted to give the player, I wanted to give them a scene because they don't get a lot of scenes, to shine. So I had Bupito kind of because the blind character usually kind of hung back at camp and kept an ear on camp while people are forging and setting up and da-da-da. And Bupito ran. I said, it's terrible, it's happened again. Another person dead, da-da-da. Please come with me. And the player was immediately suspicious. I wish I would have role-played it better, but I think it was pretty obvious right off what was happening, because there was a couple of people I think already suspicious of Bupito to begin with. So he's like, okay, so he follows Bupito. He's like, come quick. And, he's like, the body's in here. And the character's like, where Daggers is like, do I smell blood? I was like, nope. So he's pretty sure that something fishy's going on. But I did say, look, Bupito's very flustered. He's freaked out. He's not making a lot of sense. So I try to make it like there's a possibility here that, and also the Daggers, the guy playing Daggers, the blind rogue, never said, well, who is it that's died? So I'm pretty sure he's thinking that this is fishy. So anyway, Bupito says, just stay here, keep an eye on things, metaphorically speaking, and I'll be back, and ran off shouting, right? So the rogue's like, yeah, okay. So he kind of stops and he says, okay, I'm going to do a listen check. So I'm listening for everything. So he gets listen perception with advantage. He rolled very well. Said, yeah, you distinctly hear feet after several minutes sneaking back up on you. And of course it was Bupito. He doesn't know that yet. Well, they get into a fight, and he kind of surprises and attacks Bupito, and they actually get into a fight. Bupito has a short sword. Daggers has a couple of daggers, and by the dice rolls, once everything's said and done, he defeated Bupito. Now I could have had Bupito run off, but I just wanted to go ahead and resolve it. So. And he didn't know, he's like, well, can I tell by the voice who this is? And he wasn't sure, but I said, well, it's, that it's, I gave him some perception rolls, and I was like, well, it's a shorter person, but you can't tell by the oof, when you hit him who it was. And at first he was doing non-lethal damage, but then he switched to regular lethal damage. So what I rolled was when he dropped him, when he got Bupito to 0 hit points, and he took a few licks himself because he's at advantage to get attacked and disadvantage to attack. Now, I used his inspiration on one of those attacks to have a better chance of hitting, and I think that he hit Bupito on that round. But anyway, so he drops Bupito, and because he had done some non-lethal damage to begin with, I ruled that Bupito was unconscious, not dead. So I also ruled that they were wearing because he's got daggers that he carries. So they'd found some 5-foot lengths of rope in Velkenvelve when they were escaping. So he had a belt made out of that, and so he used that to tie up Bupito. So the other party's like, where are these guys at? The ranger. Eventually, I think the ranger and Eldith, who both have high survival, were able to track them down. They found out what was going on. And they're like, whoa. So, and it came out, by this point, his whole personality's changed. He's like, serve me or die. If you know what's good for me, you'll let me go. I will reward you well. He even said something like the blind rogue was talking something about his being blind. And Bupito was like, the only reason you're blind is because I willed that you would be. And all these things. He's very megalomaniacal and all this stuff, and that's what the book says, is he thinks he's the avatar of a deity, like the Darrow god of vengeance, and that he will destroy, or everything is a divine plan. Even if he dies, it's no big deal, and it's just a minor setback, and all this other stuff. So so I had his personality completely flip and really come out, and so they've got him. I was surprised they kept him alive. I don't know. They were like, well, we'll take him to Gracklstugh. And I'm like, I didn't say this, but I'm like, I don't know what Gracklstugh is going to, what they're going to want to do with him. But anyway, So that's kind of where we left it. And the drow that they're with knows is a pretty good navigator in the Underdark as well. And he's like, look, we're like a day away from Gracklstugh. So basically, at the beginning of next session, they're going to show up at Gracklstugh, and so I've got to do a lot of research on Gracklstugh. That's where things we're going to pick up. So that's basically how things went. It was another fun session. I was really happy that I hit the notes exactly like I wanted to. A lot of times I'll spontaneously do something that really drags things off course, and I don't get to the ending point that I wanted, even though that stuff can be fun. But last night, I mean, I knew I wanted to get on to Gracklstugh. I knew I wanted to have the Bupido encounter, and it worked like a charm. So very nice. And I'm still keeping my travel log that I mentioned in previous sessions, previous videos, because I'm trying to keep track of, how each session, how long they make it towards their destination, and also the pursuit level, which at the end of last session, the pursuit level was 4, which means the drow I think if it hits 6, the drow catch up to them. And at the end of this session, their pursuit level was 3, because they got a -2 because they had 2 days of fast travel, but they had a +1 for a terrain encounter, and that was the horrid sounds and all that. So they're basically at Gracklstugh. That's where we'll begin next time. And one other thing I did on I've got a log here of all my characters that are playing, and their name, character name, class, race, and alignment, passive perception, and I've got a madness column on it that, I've got 1, 2, 3. I've got 4 characters here that are madness level of 1. So that's basically how things went. Everyone still seems to really be enjoying Out of the Abyss and the Underdark. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're not already, and leave me a comment and a thumbs up on YouTube. That helps me out tremendously. But I really appreciate you watching, and we will catch you next time on Shane Plays.